Okay, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Employment Matters Committee. I've got an apologies for absence from Councillor Hackwell and Councillor Wildy is substituting, and also from Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Jones is substituting. I don't have any other apologies. Everyone else is here. Thank you. Item 2, record of the meeting. Do members agree to approve the record of the meeting of the committee held on the 4th of September 2024 and to also note the record of the meeting of the Joint Consultative Committee held on the 4th of September 2024? Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Urgent matters, I have none. Declarations of interest. Are there any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just to declare I'm a member of the NAHT union. Thank you.
Councillor Field.
Thank you. I am a member of the TSSA Trade Union and I'm a representative in my workplace. I'm also a member of Unison.
Thank you. And I'm also a member of the ASLIF Trade Union. Is there any other declarations? No. Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 5, the Speak Up Anti-Bribery, Anti-Money Laundering and Regulation of Investigatory Powers Policy. Samantha.
Thank you, Chair. The element of this particular report is around the Speak Up policy that is a matter for this committee. The committee are asked to note the comments made by the Audit Committee on the overall report as set out in Section 8. The Speak Up policy covers procedures for anybody who wishes to raise a concern relating to illegal, unethical, unprofessional conduct of the Council, including malpractice and or abuse. Section 4.1 notes an update on previous disclosures for information only, and Section 4.2 notes that there have been no concerns raised during this period of September 23 to September 24. And committee tonight are asked to recommend and note the contents of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Cook.
I think it's probably a fairly obvious question, but I do worry sometimes when there's zero concerns. Just some clarification of how we're certain the process is working. People know they can access it and there genuinely haven't been any concerns rather than a lack of access. Thank you.
Sam.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Yeah, I suppose having zero concerns is a nice place to be in the sense of there isn't anything to report, but I do understand that that could imply that people don't feel comfortable or safe to come forward with any concerns. We have a group of people, which is myself, the monitoring officer and the Section 115 officer, and we meet regularly to look at any potential complaint that comes in that could be deemed as whistleblowing. It's at that meeting where we would triage a response. So we have had stuff that has been presented to us, but it's not met the threshold of the areas that I've read out this evening. And more often than not, it becomes a grievance and it's personal rather than something of public interest or something we need to investigate. So it's not just HR who make that decision. There's a number of us who are involved in that triaging. I do think there is more we can do to raise awareness of the policy, absolutely. And if you look at our staff survey results, we always ask, are people aware? Do they know where to go if they have any issues or any concerns? And that is part of our action plan moving forward around how we really do make sure people know that this is a safe space and how to go about it and what that looks like. So yeah, not suggesting we don't have more work to do, but that is a priority for this year.
Happy. Thank you. Councillor Wildy.
Thank you. Under 4.3, the people that have spoken out in the past, do we know whether they've happily continued to work for Medway or left on good terms?
Some people that have raised concerns are protected and have continued to work at Medway, absolutely. Some of our concerns are not raised by our staff. They could be raised by a member of the public, they could be raised by an ex-employee. So we do have quite a mix of people in there. We do get a lot of anonymous concerns raised, and often that is just in an email form from an email address. And despite us trying to make contact with individuals to seek more information in a protected way, in an anonymous way, we have found that people are not responding. So again, some of those have had some light investigation, but we haven't had enough evidence to move forward, and we don't know who those people are that are raising those complaints.
But as far as you're aware, nobody has felt, I've raised a concern and now I've got to leave?
To my knowledge, that has not happened, absolutely.
Any other member? No, just from me on item 4.3 on the report as well, the comparison table. It goes 1, 2 and 8. Is that a fair comparison? Because 1 year we was in COVID, so I wouldn't see that's a fair comparison. So is there a large jump, or am I right in looking at that it's not a fair comparison because we was in different times?
I think it's hard to know if it's a fair comparison because regardless of COVID, untoward behaviour can still take place and probably more so actually when people are not present, not around, and maybe governance wasn't as tight as it could be and COVID did occupy us. So then, you know, perhaps there wasn't the right conversations happening during that time. Looking at the years in which some of these complaints are raised, the Speak Up policy was a new policy that we put in place in the particular year that we had more complaints come through. Now, we've done a lot of socialising of that policy. You can see the outcome from those policies. And a lot of people that had raised complaints through that policy were misguided in the sense of coming to HR in the first instance, so they were triaged back out. So we will still log that as a complaint if it's reached that first threshold of investigation. It's normally at that first investigatory stage that we might find it's not actually whistleblowing, it is more a HR case, and it changes direction at that point. So I think it's hard to do a comparator, isn't it? Because this is behaviours and different times. And as a council now, we're in a very different position. We've got a new chief executive, a new administration. We've got new council plan in place. We've got new values and behaviours in place. The world is very different this year compared to what it was previously. So again, as a comparator, it's really, really difficult to draw that. We don't have that kind of baseline.
Yeah, thank you. It'll be interesting to see when it comes back next year what that looks like. Thank you. Any other member? No, I've moved to the Vice Chair.
Thank you. Members are asked to note the comments of the Audit Committee set out as Section 8 of the report and note the contents of the report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Field, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 6, pay negotiations. Back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Committee tonight are asked to note the contents of this report as laid out around the pay negotiations to date. Just as a reminder, this is the 11th year of our local formal negotiations. We came out of our national conditions a while back now. So each year, Trade Union will present us with a claim, which we go away and consider, and then a further report will be presented to committee in January to set out our position. Tonight's report identifies that the Trade Union claim is a return to the NJC by the third year of administration, a 5% flat rate consolidated increase for all staff, and an uplift to sleep-in payments of 5%. The financial impact of this, including our statutory wage increases that we must apply, is just over £500,000, and that's detailed within paragraph 5 and paragraph 6. And this is based on current staff as opposed to vacancies that we currently have and vacant posts within current structures. Early negotiations have taken place. We have confirmed with the trade unions that within our presented budget, we do have a 5% allocation uplift for pay. We've had further conversations around a return to NJC and the timing of that return, so we certainly are still considering that within the term that has been presented, and we've had further discussions around all allowances, not just the sleep-in payments, and the paper in January will set out the Council's position in light of those conversations around that negotiation. Thank you. Thank you.
Any member? Councillor Fern.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one point that was raised in the JCC meeting, and that's the sleep-in payments and the discrepancy in the payments from some members. And Sam, you said you'd take that offline, but just for the minutes, I'd like that to just be sort of noted that you are dealing with that.
Yep, thank you. We'll note that. Thank you. Any other member? Just one from me. I have mentioned this before. You recognise first aiders with an annual leave day, I believe. If you volunteer as a workplace first aider, do you get an extra annual leave day? No, you don't.
No, you don't get any extra annual leave. We have first aiders and fire wardens who receive additional payments.
So that goes on to, sorry, so do mental health first aiders get that as well?
Mental health first aiders don't get that, so we have mental health champions. They don't have the same. It's the trained first aid personnel that have the payment as well as the fire evacuation staff.
Okay, but you don't have mental health first aiders, so they don't do the Samaritan's mental health first aider course.
So under the Time to Change pledge, we did a lot of work with our mental health champions. I would need to check if they've all been recently trained in terms of being up to date with their training commitment. When we come on to our reward and recognition strategy item, one of the areas we do focus on is mental health and really engaging in professional training for all of those that are involved in it.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? No, I'll move to the Vice Chair, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So firstly, the committee is asked to note the report, including the progress made to date under the pay negotiations protocol. But just to follow on from Councillor Fern's point, I've got some feedback specifically from JCC. So as mentioned, request for further consideration of an uplift to sleeping payment following inconsistencies and inequalities was requested. And secondly, requested the return, as mentioned, to NJC for future-proofing and national collective bargaining, including the option of a consideration of a staggered return. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Seconded. Councillor Field, thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. We move on to item 7, updated MedPay performance, progression and pay policy. Nicola, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm providing a draft MedPay performance progression and pay policy. Originally, we brought a draft of this to EMC on the 6th of June 2023. This policy has now been updated following learning and feedback from the pilot and subsequent phases of the project. Key changes from the original policy are there's now detail of the new performance appraisal process contained within the policy, and the performance appraisal process now includes sections on wellbeing and career conversations. It also explicitly incorporates our values and behaviours. We have removed the levels of award for performance appraisal at 1A, 1B, 2 and 3, removed the link to bonus pay and an additional annual leave for wider contribution. And we've replaced this with the introduction of our career progression frameworks, which gives staff an opportunity to progress within their range from level A to B and B to C. We've also included in the policy now an explanation of the pay negotiation process and how the cost of living award is negotiated and decided upon, to really try to make the whole pay policy process more transparent and understandable for staff. Trade unions and employee forums have been consulted with on this new policy and a DIA completed, and I'm asking the committee to agree the implementation of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Fern?
Thank you, Chair. So again, just following on from JCC, and some concerns were raised in phase 1 that there were members of staff that were going to be sort of not a recompense for, in terms of salary going across, it wasn't going to be honoured, etc., or be lower. And there were some concerns again that in this phase 2 that there was going to be lower salaries paid. And you explained a little bit around the banding and everything there. But is there anything that we can do, or is there anything you can do as people leading this, that our members of staff don't have to go to the union reps? They can come to you and express those concerns, any grievance with it. But before, quite rightly, they go to the union members and trade union members and raise these concerns. But is there anything that we can do to make our staff feel that they can come to us, to you as their employers, as their line managers, etc.?
Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we were really conscious at the start of this project that this was going to touch pretty much everybody in the organisation. So one of the first things we did was recruit volunteers to be our MedPay champions. So these are members of staff from across the council, and my project team meet with them at least monthly. We talk to them about what's happening, which teams are going through. We talk through all the frequently asked questions with them. They've got opportunity to raise concerns and issues with us directly. And we also then pass messages or ask them to go back into their teams and services to ask questions to then come back to the next meeting with feedback for us. We have a regular newsletter specifically around the project, and in there we always publicise all the different ways that anybody can contact anyone in our project team, and obviously also reiterate they've got their line managers available as well as trade unions, etc. as well to talk to. I think, you know, for example, the Chief Executive and the leader this year have run Medway Live events. There was lots of opportunity to ask questions anonymously to them, and there were quite a few raised around the MedPay review project as well. We also attend regularly our Medway Makers Forum, for, representatives from our project, again to talk to those group of staff to hear from the ground the kind of questions and queries that people have.
Councillor Fern.
Quickly come back. So, I mean, there's obviously that gap there somewhere, but it's quite reassuring that, you know, you're doing all of those things. And I don't know how hard you and your team work. You know, I've been on this committee for some time now, and I understand all that. And you know, and for the recommendations at the end, you know that, you know, how hard you're working, and you know how sort of credit you are to our staff.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Thank you. Two specific questions for me, Chair, if that's okay. The first one just follows on from that. We had some discussion at JCC that you felt that there were predominantly people winning in terms of their grading and being regraded, but it was felt there were some examples of people where that might not have happened. Is there planned to be a kind of master spreadsheet of, you know, ragging, so we get a picture of where people were, where people are, and the kind of overall, in terms of the cost, but also in terms of the profile of where people have landed? That's my first question. If I can have a second question, is much more practical. As I read this, ironically, I'm reading it on paper now, but on my computer, I was really conscious of the fact that this is a lot of forms to fill in. And I was really aware about, you know, Medway 2.0 and the move to digital, and how lovely it would be if we had all the money in the world to make an app or make a system. What are the plans to make this not only more user-friendly, so it isn't lots of forms to download and fill in, but also then to allow that kind of management of the process because things are more digital? Thank you.
Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so to address kind of the winners and losers situation, the purpose of the MedPay review project, the main purpose of it wasn't to provide everybody with a pay rise. So we have a cost of living award that is negotiated every year, and that's kind of the main part of how people will salaries will increase. The main purpose of this project was to allow people to progress within their range depending on their level of performance and competence in that role. So that's why we've introduced the progression there. What we've also tried to address is historical inequalities or perceived inequalities, and as a result of that we have job evaluated several posts, and in some instances those posts have been regraded higher. So there are winners in terms of they've potentially moved from a grade range 3 to a range 4, so they get the salary increase. And then they'll also have their assessment against the career progression framework criteria and be placed at a point of A, B and C. And that again may result in an uplift in their current salary as well. In terms of losers, we are not taking away any salary from any person through this process. We have introduced a salary honouring process, so if somebody is assessed, for example, at a level A, and that equates to a salary of 30,000, and they're currently earning 31,000, their salary will be honoured until the point that they either progress to level B, and so they'd move through there, or the cost of living award is applied and that gap reduces.
Thank you so much for that. I think my only kind of clarification would be whether we've got a record of how many times that's happening, and whether the general picture is that people are staying on a par or being progressed up, just so we could see the percentage that are affected, because I understand there might be, you know, perhaps less of a cost of living applied, perhaps, if they're being held? I might have understood that incorrectly. No, that's fine. But are we just making sure that, you know, that isn't happening too many times? Thank you.
We did an initial evaluation of our pilot phase, and we undertook a DIA assessment of that. So we've got the results from that, as well as measuring a number of other KPIs. And it's our intention that, because now the rest of the organisation is pretty much in, one cohort, that we will do evaluation at the end of the implementation, but also we need to do ongoing evaluation. So we need to monitor, review, how many people are applying for progression, what's the impact of that, is that causing any disparities anywhere. So this isn't a project that will come to an end and the evaluation stops. I keep talking about it, quite passionately about it, that this is something that we need to monitor and evaluate for the longer term. Module to record this. There is, within our current HR and payroll system, there is a module that we could utilise, but we currently don't have it. So there is a cost linked to that. So potentially we need to provide a business case to do that. Capacity-wise, my team haven't had the time to even write that business case, but equally, HR as a whole are looking at different ways to transform, and it may be that there is a better solution than just purchasing that. So it's quite a big piece of work to do. So in the interim, it's not ideal, it is a bit clunky. We have updated the system where we can in terms of being able to record the outcome of your performance appraisal, for example, and we've utilised our service desk process in terms of the managing the movement of the forms between people.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Thank you very much thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this very thorough report. I just want to look at section 4.2, so page 36 of the front paper, and it just notes the changes from the original policy. It states our values and behaviours have been explicitly incorporated in performance appraisal. Now, values and behaviours are very important for organisations in, fostering respect and getting the best out of everyone. What I just want to check on and just to see if you've got any comment on is whether, in terms of values and behaviours, they can be quite subjective in terms of ratings and appraisal. And sometimes people, particularly those members of staff that are neurodiverse, might have such neurodiverse conditions that might, if applied in the wrong way and managers are not properly trained, might see as poor behaviours when actually that's who they are. And we want to encourage them to be their authentic self. Obviously, you have talked about in the the equalities impact assessment about how it will advance on disabilities, but I just wanted to check that we've got appropriate training and guidance just to make sure that we are neurodiverse members of staff in Medway are not negatively impacted adversely on that matter.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. I think firstly it's important to say that there is no pay element related to the assessment of the performance appraisal, particularly around our values and behaviours. We know that this is something very new to the organisation, so we're doing lots of communication around kind of what it means to be demonstrating those values. And we really wanted to include it in the performance appraisal so that those discussions were happening and people were really starting to understand and think about how they are themselves living the values in their day-to-day role. From a training perspective, thinking with my kind of EDI head on, we've already recognised that there is work to do in this area. We have a number of different training opportunities in EDI, face-to-face training as well as e-learning, and some of that's mandatory and some of that isn't. We're building it into our Medway manager training as well. There is more we could do in that space and more we can learn from you know, our staff community on best how to address some of those issues that we may have.
You happy, Councillor Field? Yep. Thank you. Any other member? No, thank you. Move to the Vice Chair.
Thank you. So, firstly, the committee is asked to agree the policy attached as Appendix A to the report for all staff subject to MedPay PPP with immediate effect. And secondly, the feedback from the JCC was that there was a concern raised that salary honouring may be causing a downgrading effect, particularly on groups over 50 years old, and a conversation about whether this should be included in the disability impact report. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Field. Thank you. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to item 8, reward and recognition strategy from Samantha.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out our total reward and recognition strategy 24 to 28. You can find the full strategy in Appendix 1, and it forms part of our wider attraction and our ambition to become an employer of choice. The 6 key priorities and action within this strategy stem from the previous annual employee survey, as well as then various drop-in sessions that we've done, including our live events and our Medway makers. It focuses around a couple of key things that we've been up to this year to really demonstrate the new stuff that is in place, because certainly from the survey it was obvious that not all of our staff were fully aware of the benefits and the rewards and why Medway is a great place to work. So there's lots to do around the campaign of making sure that all staff are tapping into those benefits that are available, but also talks to the fact that there is more that we can do because there's extra benefits that staff would like to see put in place. If I just pick up a few to give you some examples, we look at recognition. So this year was the first year that we reintroduced the Directorate Awards around recognition across a number of different categories. We've received some really good feedback on that in particular. People do want to be acknowledged for the good work they're doing, and that is a peer-to-peer recognition that comes. It's not just from managers. So to be nominated for award, even in the sense of a nomination, really is something that we should be celebrating. We've also introduced the Long Service Award at 5, 10 and 15 years, and that does attract extra annual leave, so it's not just a certificate, it comes with extra annual leave. When we look at compensation, performance and progression, we're aware, and we've discussed this tonight, around the MedPay review and the investment that has gone into place for the MedPay review. That's not about lifting everybody's salary, but it is creating that career opportunity for people to have inbound progression, which we haven't had before. The committee will be fully aware, because it was recommended to full council, the 5% pay award of last year, and also from our previous item, you'll note that we've got a 5% proposed pay award for this year. That those 5% are the best that we've had since we've been in local terms and conditions, so there's a real investment into staff and a real commitment that we want staff to know that they are really valuable to us. As well as that, despite our financial challenges that we've got, which are well known at committee, we've seen significant investment in our teams. So where there has been a change of priority or there's been a demand on workload, there has been additional investment within teams, which has meant that our workforce has grown. Employee benefits, we have a number of employee benefits which are listed, but to note a couple: shopping discounts, lease cars, interest-free bicycle loans, just as an example. And one of the things that came out of our survey was our colleagues really value our occupational pension, the generous annual leave that we have, the flexi leave entitlement, and the general benefits around the supportive measures such as sickness leave as well as special leave. It's really important to us around this reward and recognition that our employees have a voice, and we're working really hard across our senior leadership team around the two-way communication. This year we saw the introduction of our live Medway events, where we had all staff conferences, of which the Chief Executive and the leader presented the kind of update around what we were doing as an employer, but then also took live questions from the floor, which were really informative, and people really did appreciate it. We've also introduced this year the Chief Executive Meet the Team Days, so there's been a bit of a roadshow across the organisation, really understanding some of the things that people are grappling with on the floor, but also celebrating the success and the great work that the teams are doing. You'll be well versed on our annual survey, and that's come to committee before, that gives us some real rich information. We had a 58% completion rate this time round, of which 68% felt that they did have the opportunity to give us their feedback, which we want to increase for next year, and there's a number of actions that go into place to do just that. Medway Makers is a group of people that represent the organisation, who are really passionate and really proactive, and really do get involved in all of the topics and really act as a sound base for us to get information out to the majority of teams that we want to engage with. We've also launched the Equality Board. It's a relaunch. It was in existence before, but we've changed the membership. And this really is being governed by our equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, as well as additional things like we want to do, for example, mobilising more staff networks. So a survey has just gone out to our teams to talk to them directly about some of the supportive networks they would like to see in place, not necessarily just the protected characteristics, but the support that staff want. And just looking at the early summary of that feedback already, we know that most definitely working parents and neurodiversity are two key areas that are coming out quite strong in terms of networks being formed. And we also have the Gunwharf investment in terms of our head office building. That is a considerable investment, and there is lots of activity happening with the contractors around the design of that and the voice of our staff. And again, a survey closes today that has gone out to all service managers for them to talk to their teams around the need and the working environment we need to create within Gunwharf. And that has included the contractors themselves going along to talk to people from our Disability and Carers Network, the Medway makers, as well as other teams as and when is necessary, and that will continue. Wellbeing, in terms of wellbeing and work-life balance, flexible working is one of our key benefits, and that's not just about having the opportunity to work hybrid, but it's about the opportunity to do things like 9-day fortnights, as well as having a very strong flexible working scheme which allows you to build up that time, but then to take time off each month. I mentioned special leave already, and we have a really proactive Healthy Mind and Wellbeing group, which this year launched a wellbeing hub for managers, as well as things like the Press Pause campaign, because from the survey we knew that many people didn't feel they were taking breaks as often as they should. There is more we need to do in this space, so we have run throughout the year sessions around mindfulness, meditation and stress management workshops. They do tend to be on the back of a theme, so it could be Mental Health Week, and then we would spin up some workshops, but we want to make that part of our curriculum so that's available for staff more regularly as the year goes on, rather than it being themed around a particular campaign. We want to look at some professional training for managers around particularly mental health. Our staff survey told us that a lot of our managers don't feel confident or equipped enough to be supporting people around mental health, and we know from our sickness that is quite high, so we're just short of 10 working days per full-time equivalent, and when we look at the volume of days lost in terms of us as a council, that's up to 21,000 days, the highest point in that being anxiety, stress and mental health. So a real key area for us, focusing around how we support managers. We're also looking at making the policies and the procedures and the tools that are available to managers to deal with some of those more difficult sessions being better engaging, more intuitive, rather than just a policy that tells you why you must do something. The tools are there to enable you and help you. And in January, you will see a paper come back, particularly around sickness absence and the work that we're putting in place to tackle those figures that I've just shared with you. We've got occupational health and we've got support systems in place around support for staff who might be experiencing any kind of difficulty, which is bereavement, could be financial hardship, or it could be work matters. They are contracts that we have in place that are under scrutiny at the moment because they are coming up for re-tendering, and we are really revisiting the need of the organisation now because we've been with those contracts for quite some time. The contract itself hasn't necessarily changed, but our people have and the needs have, so we really do need to spend some time to make sure we get the right provision in place to support the workforce. And we're also looking at an enhanced care, healthcare provision. So we have something around eye care vouchers, for example, where people can have free eye tests who are working with computers. But at the moment, there's a lot out there that would pick up a wider health benefit package that would be more beneficial to our staff. So again, as part of the work we're doing, we're looking at how we can enhance that healthcare provision for our employees. And then finally, just to mention development, we've been running a complete Medway manager leadership development session that talks to all of the subject matters that we're asking our managers to cover, but it's almost like an intro into these are the things we're asking you to do at Medway. What more further support might you need in those areas? And that's where, in particular, the information around sickness and the confidence levels started to come out around that. We've got a new induction that's in place that came out very strong within our staff survey, but we do know that we need to enhance that because our turnover, whilst generally has decreased, and we're sitting at 12% with an ambition of 10%, we do know that our one-year turnover is still significantly high, and that is sitting at 24%, which is way too high for us. So we've really got to think about that attraction strategy when people are landing with us, what's happening in those first few months when they're with us, and are we making the most of that time? So that protected induction is absolutely key. We've mentioned the new values and behaviours. It was brought up in the last subject. That is something new that we are now working with culturally throughout the organisation, and our appraisal point end of year is a really good opportunity to explore how people are feeling about them, if they feel that their job gives them the opportunity to demonstrate those, or if there's other things we do need to be up to really bring those values to life. And then finally, we have mentioned it this evening, but we have asked as an increase to our learning and development budget in the corporate centre, and we've asked to double that for this year, and that will be a recommendation that will be coming as part of the pay proposal in January for full recommendation to full cabinet. So a comprehensive list there, but I did want to take the time to really pull out some key aspects that we've been working on this year to really demonstrate that this is a priority for the corporate management team, and we really do want to get this right with our staff, and we are listening to the staff. And this strategy, whilst it might feel a little bit repetitive in terms of the workforce strategy that we have in place, I think this is probably one of the more important ones that staff are likely to pay attention to and really want to kind of understand what it means for them. So there will be a campaign of launch after this. Tonight's outing at EMC is our final kind of governance route, so it hasn't been launched to staff yet, but I'm quite excited about the feedback that will receive. And again, whilst it is a strategy, it is set in stone around our ambition, the action plan that goes with that will be iterated and changed as we go and as we learn more from our staff and the opportunities that presents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Cook?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely massive, well done. And I think the bit that really stuck out for me in what you were saying was, we've had the survey, you spoke there about some of the aims and your ambitions, and what I can really clearly see there is the threads of you said we did, and I think that would be really helpful to see. I think, how do you avoid it being almost sporadic and, you know, individual managers giving individual opportunities to different people and structure into career pathways? That's been my first question. And secondly, just returning back to the survey and looking right back onto that page where you've said, you know, about 67% felt. It's still a third of respondents that don't. And so how are we benchmarking? You've spoken about, you know, we will therefore see a 3% increase. Are we benchmarking against other local authorities? I'm sure we touched on this a little bit when we looked at the survey, but, you know, how can we be certain that that is where we want to be and that it's ambitious enough for this strategy? Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cook, and thank you for your supportive comments. The individual manager thing, particularly around the career pathways, as Nicola mentioned, we had something called a pilot, but we moved quite rapidly into the rollout, so we're not in that full evaluation yet. And one of the things that we have requested from our audit team is that they run alongside us when those first kind of progressional points come through, and there's an independent view on that in terms of that evidence that's being presented. There's an opportunity if somebody feels that their manager hasn't given them fair chance, they can still raise a concern as well. So again, it won't be just HR owning that process. There will be an independent review on that to make sure, almost in a consultancy position, audit will work with us to make sure that we're getting that right. So yeah, we absolutely have provisions in place to make sure that that is the case. The reality of how many will come through will probably mean we won't do 100% sampling, but there will be a 10%, 20% sampling. And until we've got the full programme underway, we can't really anticipate when the volume might be coming in. One of the things we're working through as a team at the moment is I've got a lot of my HR folk offline doing the MedPay review element of it and introducing this new framework, but there's going to be a number of new things that we've put in place that now we need to build into our structure moving forward, and that kind of consistency piece and check piece is one of the key areas that we will constantly need to validate to make sure we don't have that drift. There's constant checking and we don't find ourselves back where we did when we started on this journey. So I'm quite confident we have plans in place that we can report back on as and when required. The element of benchmarking, so we probably need to go more widely nationally. Our main kind of catchment, if you like, is across Kent. We work across Kent with other local authorities and we share a lot of our information, whether that's our sickness, our turnover, our staff survey results. But more recently, we've been working with the Integrated Care Board, so we've incorporated the NHS within that. And there's a lot of factors within the staff surveys where we've tried to align our questions so we can get better benchmarking between us. But most definitely, there's other unitary authorities that would be a good comparator, and we do have a network there, so yeah, most definitely we've got more to do outside of Kent, I would suggest.
Thank you. Any other member? No, thank you. I'll move to the Vice Chair, please.
Thank you. So, Employment Matters Committee is asked to note the report and Appendix 1 to the report, and raise any questions and or suggestions. And then the specific feedback from the JCC was the consideration that in some cases there might be a cap being set on training opportunities which were then needed for progression. That was discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded. Councillor Field, thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, move to the last item. Item 9, the Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Policy. Nicola, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So our current Fair Access and Inclusion Policy, which can be found at Appendix A, was last updated in 2012 and is really a statement rather than a policy. With a new EDI strategy in place, it was felt it was absolutely timely to review and update this policy to ensure that they complement and align with each other. The Council wants Medway to be a fair and inclusive place for employees and residents with equal access and opportunity and a voice in decisions that are made that affect them. There are many reasons why EDI is essential. It improves employee engagement, it helps to reflect and understand diverse needs, it builds a positive reputation, ensures we're promoting fairness and we're legally compliant, and a number of other things too. The new policy can be found at Appendix B. It sets out the Council's overall commitment to EDI, the steps that are being taken to eliminate discrimination, and what positive action means. We really want to encourage all staff to declare and feel able to declare their protected characteristics so that we can ensure appropriate support where applicable and needed. This policy has been shared with trade unions and employee forums for comments, and a DIA has been undertaken. The committee is asked to agree the adoption of this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Fern?
Thank you, Chair. Fully support the policy. One point that was raised by our trade union representatives earlier was how we're going to measure outcomes of this. So I don't know if you could perhaps just touch on that, Nicola.
Please, Nicola.
Thank you. So as part of the EDI strategy, there is an action plan with a number of measures on there. This action plan will be what has been presented to our Equality Board that's been newly refreshed. So we'll be accountable to them to provide updates on how we're progressing against that action plan. And the Equality Board themselves as well also want to contribute some additional objectives there. And again, they'll be reviewed through that Equality Board. Thank you.
Happy, Councillor Fern? Yeah. Any other member? No, thank you. It's a good piece of work, so thank you for that. Sorry, Councillor Field?
So I just wanted to raise the Fair Access, Diversity and Inclusion Policy, paragraph 2 on page 133 of the meeting bundle. It's the bit where it says Medway Council wants to be acknowledged as an organisation that promotes fair access and inclusion. It then talks about the Council's committed to ensuring that no service user, employee, partner, contractor, etc., lists the protected characteristics. Obviously, recently, one of the highlights over the last year at full council is that we unanimously, as a council, passed that care and care leavers should be treated as a protected characteristic. Obviously, that work there's a lot of feasibility, and part of that work was to do feasibility. But I'm just wondering, are we at a stage where we can include that in that policy?
Thank you, Councillor Field. Nicola?
Thank you, Councillor Field. I think you're referring to Appendix A, which is the old policy. So in the new policy, we've updated our equality statement that will go into all policies at Section 3, and it does include those with care experience. So the Council is committed to ensuring that no service user, employee, job applicant, those with care experience, etc., etc. No,
for the confusion
there.
there.
There's a lot of papers tonight, I appreciate that. But yes, we have captured it, and we'll roll it out into all our new policies as well.
No, thank you. I think we're not used to such a big agenda. That's the issue, Councillor Field, not yourself. If there's any other comments, I'll move to the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Employment Matters Committee is asked to agree the adoption of the revised Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Policy attached to Appendix B to the report. And as has been mentioned in the discussion, there was a request from JCC for further clarity as to how outcomes will be measured. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded, Councillor Field? Councillor Jones, thank you. Is that agreed?
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you. Last item of the evening, the Youth and Community Workers Pay and Conditions. Sam to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Employment Matters Committee are asked to consider the options in respect to the pay and conditions for youth workers and agree a preferred option to form part of our pay offer that will come back to committee in January. So back in April 2014, a new pay and grade system for youth workers was implemented, which links progression to performance and removal of automatic increments. The pay awards were also changed from a national position to a local bargaining position. Whilst the pay element was changed, no other terms and conditions were changed. Therefore, all other terms and conditions are still linked to the Pink Book. The main one of concern here, in terms of it being a particular change, would be around the pension scheme. So currently our youth workers are aligned to the teachers' pension scheme and not the local government scheme. 4.3 sets out the rationale and the recommendation for consideration for option 3, which is to return to the national conditions for this particular group of staff. And a couple of key reasons for that really is around the difficulties in recruitment. So these terms and conditions are particular to that profession and therefore are aligned more to that profession, particularly in terms of social hours, antisocial hours in which they might need to work. We've also said in previous items this evening that we will consider national return in terms of our negotiating, and it would seem that if that is something we are considering, then to do a full consultation exercise with a group of staff to bring them onto local terms, only therefore then to consult again to move them back to national, wouldn't be the most appropriate thing to do. So timing isn't really aligned at this stage. Having said that, with the recruitment challenges we have within the sector, we do need to, as we have the rest of the organisation, review the current structures and pay, and this seems the most simplest, preferred by the staff as well as officers option. I welcome comments and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, on JCC, I think it was quite clear that option 3 was the preferred option out of the 3, and also there was issues with the pension as well. They were going to move on to possibly a less favourable pension. That'd be correct as well. They moved on to MedPay.
Yes, so they would need to change from the teacher's pension to local government pension, which would be a considerable terms and conditions change, which would need full consultation.
Thank you. Any other member? No, I'll move to the Vice Chair then, please.
Thank you. We're just asked to note the report, but as already fed back, the feedback from JCC was support for option 3, and that came particularly from a group of consulted youth workers, and the request for inclusion in the ongoing access to teacher pensions was also put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. There being no other business, the meeting is now closed. Thank you.